I'm Ken Phelan, CTO of Gotham Technology Group. I'm here with my friend Robert Johnston, currently with Enable. You're one of the you came via the Ad Lumen story, but why don't you give like a good quick background on you so everyone knows who we're talking to.
Yeah, sure. I'm currently the Chief Innovation Officer here at Enable Technologies. I came to Enable through Enable's acquisition of a company that I founded in late 2016, early 2017, called Adlumin, which
Mhm.
was doing security operations and managed detection and response. My background, prior to that was I spent about 8 years in the military doing mostly cybersecurity. That's where I call it cut my teeth, and got the bug and got into the security business. I had left the military in 2016, and then spent a brief time at CrowdStrike doing incident response in their services business, and then left CrowdStrike to found Adlumin and ran that. I was the CEO of that through its acquisition in 2024 by Enable.
Right. Awesome. Awesome. I think it's always one of the conversations. People that come from the military into the commercial space. One of the comments that I make about it is this change of gears from like when you talk to people who are in the military about cyber, it's literally a matter of life and death. Like a breach is going to, people are going to die in a breach. When you talk to people in business about breaches, like breaches are a matter of dollar signs. Like they see it more as a they sort of takes the edge off it. I mean, how did you see that transition? Because you know what I mean. Like I think when you go to the commercial space, it's just a different feel to it, right?
Yeah, it's definitely different. So in the military, I was like an operator. I was doing
Right.
the work, right?
Right.
Um, and then, although I knew plenty about leadership and decision making and all of these things, I knew absolutely nothing about business.
Right.
Absolutely nothing, right? Because you don't
Yeah.
you don't learn anything about business
Right.
in the military. And when I went to CrowdStrike, I was on the incident response side too, not really on the business side. So I was doing
Yep.
operations. So everything I learned about business, I learned as CEO of Adlumin, and then learned the hard way in a lot of cases. But it was an interesting transition because there's a big difference between uh, working in security and being in the business of security.
Right.
And they're two fundamentally different sort of mindsets.
Yep.
And I think part of our advantage at Adlumin is I learned to bridge both, right? I came
Right.
not just from a pure business background, I came from an operator background.
Right.
So I was in deep in the technology, I was in deep in the threat. I was in deep in those kinds of topics, the way just pure business school people or salespeople for in a lot of ways are not, right? Just
Right.
because their kind of growth pattern in the industry is not the same. And I just was forced to sort of learn the other side,
Hmm.
which is equally as hard, by the way. Like
Yeah.
the business side of security, it's about product positioning. Are you solving a real
Yeah.
business problem?
Right. Right.
Technology problems are not business problems. And
Right.
and
Right. Right.
security people, oftentimes it's like you're smashing bugs. Like you see a technical problem and you're like, oh, we'll just develop sort of a security solution to solve this really niche security problem. But that doesn't always translate into a security business problem.
Right. 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 Yeah, it's different too. I think I got it. So certainly, like coming out the Marines, I would imagine that if there's something that a Marine's supposed to do to stay safe in cyber, they do it, unlike an American employee. So it's probably like a good helpful compliance culture in terms of doing what you're
Yeah,
supposed to do.
there's, definitely follow the rules. Like your ribbons are one eighth
Yeah, yeah,
of an inch exactly from the top of your pocket,
right, right,
type of attention to detail that certainly comes out of the Marines and like makes its way into your just life, into
yep,
your life in general. And a military mindset. And I worked at the National Security Agency for a little
mm,
while too. That was part
yeah,
of my Marine Corps career. It ended up being my last duty station. You just being a Marine and being in the military and at the NSA, like you do approach problems like you're always at war.
right,
You know,
right,
every problem is like a wartime problem.
right,
And so And you do now that I, reflect on my career a little bit, you tackle business problems and product problems the same way. You
Right.
look at it like you're always in the war room.
Yeah, yeah. And also like a big, and I know we've had this conversation a few times. So, Enable is a big cybersecurity managed services provider across a number of different sort of stack items. And we can talk a little bit about that in a second. But like, well, obviously we provide managed services to Gotham as well, work through you guys and through other tool sets. But one of the challenges in talking to people about the issues as a managed service provider, you talk to customers and you know they might have a cyber staff of one person, three part-time, like in terms of how they're tooled and what they have for that stuff. Organizations don't have these giant budgets. They're not the Marines. They're not a Fortune 10 bank. They're not these people, and many of them are just sort of outgunned. I mean, that's part of the transition too. Like going from this place where at the NSA, you have all of this stuff, you're fighting these battles, and you talk to a client who's at some level fighting the same battle, but with a handful of people who are looking at it part time and they're not doing other IT things. Like that, how do you talk to people about the scale differences and the size of the war that they're in?
Yeah. So in today's world, these small security teams or
Mhm.
IT teams at companies have just been consistently asked to do more with less over the years. I mean, it
Right.
used to be 15 years ago, they were only doing IT operations. So they were just, managing computers and managing Active Directory. And then over the years, the scope of their responsibility has grown immensely. They're responsible for security now.
Yep.
The regulatory and compliance demands have increased. And, you know, as government always does, they will only
Yep.
ever increase sort of year
Yeah.
over year over year, right? And what has not increased though is that same team was three or
Right.
four people 10, 15 years ago. And that team is still three or four people today,
Right.
but is tasked with more. And so what's given, I think, to the rise of managed services and managed security is a recognition of the fact that, look, they can't do all these jobs. Like IT operations and security operations have merged, especially in sort of call it the tail end of the enterprise and down. And I think you had a great quote. There are maybe, whatever it is, 500 companies on the
Yeah.
planet that should have their own SOC
Right.
because the fact is it's complicated. It takes a deep
Yeah.
specialty. There are so many different aspects of it. And when you're doing IT operations, network operations, and security operations, and it's the same team that's really tasked with
Yeah.
all of them,
Yeah.
um, it's too much. You what ends up happening is you don't do them all effectively.
Yeah. I remember talking about one of my favorite stories. I talked to the CTO of this. It was a financial company, it was an investment company. Not a and this is also like time, like go back in the time machine back. This is probably like 1999-ish, like whatever, right? There's an internet. But we sold him like an early stage SIM product. And I know he had no cyber staff, he had an IT team of some sorts, whatever. And I'm like, what are you doing with what are you doing? Like we bought it from us, so I got a check, so that was nice. But like what are you doing with this? Like, what do you do with the alerts? He goes, oh, they all go to my inbox. I'm like, your inbox, you just have all the alerts sent to your inbox. He goes, well, I have a rule to move them to a folder. And I said, then what happens to them? And he goes, well, every now that I go through them, I'm like, well, that's probably not the best use of tech, but good luck. And part of the problem also, like we were talking about this expansion of scope or whatever, is this decrease of the time frame, right? Like how long do you have to respond to, an incident before it moves laterally? I mean, I've seen some numbers, but I mean, what do you think the time frame is at this point that people need to look at?
Well, the time frame has been decreasing over the years, and now
Yeah.
with the rise of AI, it will decrease to, potentially
Hmm.
milliseconds or seconds. But what my first real job in the Marine Corps in security ops was at this. It was the SOC for the Marine Corps. It
Yeah.
was called the Marine Corps Network Operations and Security Center. And that's the way that you used to do this business. But I mean, you're right. Only there were 1,000 people in that organization, 1,000
Right.
people, and it ran sort of the global network for the Marine Corps.
Right.
And everything was split up into silos. It's like I
Right.
was in security ops
Right.
and we were in building 5.
Right.
Well, network operations was built in building 3. Enterprise services back then they split out email, they split out, SharePoint was on-prem, they split out all that stuff. Then they called it enterprise services. That was in like building one. And I did not go to building three. And I did not go to building one. And they did not come to ours. It was kind of like everyone had their own silos, but you
Hmm.
needed 1,000 people to run it like that. Now, these 3, 4 people are being asked to do what that 1,000 person organization is doing: enterprise services, network ops, security
Yep.
ops, all it's just one team. And when it comes to the dwell time, when you're spread so thin and you're looking at so many different things, one of the things I am deeply concerned about is AI bringing that dwell time to near zero. I'll give you an
Right.
example. Like on average, like a ransomware actor would breach the environment, and a couple weeks later, 2, 3 weeks later, you would get sort of the ransomware attack. And the
Right.
reason that that would occur is two primary reasons. One is the attackers most often would actually stage the attack some point in the future, right?
Right.
They do that in order to burn off the initial logs and to
Hmm.
kind of be out of the environment, and the attack is just launched and there's no kind of immediate indicators to grab a hold of, right?
Right.
So it creates chaos and confusion. The second reason is because there's a human
Right.
behind the scenes, and he doesn't know everything
Yep.
about the environment, right? He'll breach an account in Microsoft
Hmm.
or in Google, and then he'll use that account to eventually kind of conduct that ransomware attack. But between breaching the account and the ransomware, he has a lot of things to figure out in between, which is
Right.
where you got the kind of slow effects, or an opportunity in the defense, an opportunity to detect that bad guy between when the account was breached and all the little things that he was doing between that and the ransomware attack over a several week period. So you actually had quite a nice opportunity to detect the bad guy
Right.
and mitigate the bad guy. But with the rise of AI, you remove the human, all that decision making can just be made,
Right.
decision, 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 decision. And that couple week period that you had to detect an attacker may now be compressed down to minutes.
Right.
Uh, you know, and so if if the timeline's compressed down to minutes, you only have minutes to detect the whole chain. Very
Right. Right.
hard. Problem's
No,
getting harder.
yeah, and that's what's going to push us to automated and AI on the defense side too. But I mean, I just back up a little bit and talk about, like, you've been doing the managed security thing. Enable bought out Lumen. They're building a portfolio. But, again, if you look back, I mean, some people would manage security 10 years ago might have just been somebody managing your firewalls, right? Like, in your mind, like, what how has managed service cyber services changed? How is it changing? How does it need to keep growing? Like, give me like an evolution of what makes a good managed services cyber offering.
And managed security did start in
Yeah.
the firewall, and that business still
Yeah.
exists today, because
Yeah.
look, the position of the firewall may have changed. There are now
Right.
cloud-based firewalls. But a firewall is a complicated piece of technology. It needs to be
Yep.
tuned. There are rules, because not only does a firewall block threats for you, it does that, but also if you block legitimate traffic, people can't surf the internet. And
Right.
you get an operations problem, which is
Right.
where good management kind of comes into play. Not to
Yep.
mention you have the quality of service side.
Yep.
You've got the updates and all the vulnerabilities that you have to watch for in firewall. So that business still exists today, and that's certainly where managed security started, right? And then
Right.
came the rise of sort of endpoint, legacy antivirus, and then next gen AV. That was also complicated technology. It had a lot of false positives, which means in the managed security standpoint, like you had to do a lot of whitelisting, because again, when it was killing things that were not bad, that were legitimate, you had an operations issue, and it just became overwhelming for end customers that weren't
Right.
necessarily sophisticated enough and didn't have the time, mostly,
Yep.
to manage those technologies. Now you fast forward to today, and you have all sorts of technologies. Phishing became a big problem, right? So you have
Right.
these phishing technologies, which are you know getting more and more complicated over the years. You added a 24/7 sort of aspect to security to mesh all these different technologies together,
Yep.
because now, in order to secure an environment, you don't need to secure it just at the firewall or at the endpoint. You have to secure it in like 15, 20 different places because you have the SaaS
Right.
portfolio now, you have the firewall still, you have the endpoint, you've got the cloud, you've got email, right? And so who was going to bring all that together? And then it came the rise of sort of managed detection and response and SIM and cloud XDR, where it's like, all right, look, we will bring all that in. Security is now, especially with the rise of e-crime, right? Cyber
Yeah.
criminal organizations. Now the threat is so broad, it's not just nation states anymore.
Right.
It's, crime is probably even worse for most businesses than it is. Actually, it is worse
Yeah. Yeah.
than nation states, and all these complex technologies um, to sort of manage. And so
Right.
it was a perfect fit. It was a perfect fit because if you're even a 5,000 person organization,
Yep.
chances are you cannot effectively manage, implement, and secure 20 different security systems plus
Right.
all your IT ops stuff.
Right. Right. It's also like I think a little bit of a tension between sort of platform on the managed services side and sort of customers who want a best of breed. So sometimes I look at some of the managed cyber offerings are you guys buy whatever you want, we'll come in and manage it. And to me, that's a little challenging. I'm like, well, how is that different from me hiring the guy? Like at that point, if I've built this bespoke stack, so I mean, but there are good reasons to have the right best of breed. So I mean, I guess give me your feels on that like that. So, can you have the best of breed? Are there places where this is a federalization problem? How do you think about that?
Well, the threat has changed. The
Right,
threat has changed, and so there was always, or for a decade or so now, it's like, do you go ecosystem or do you go best of breed? 10 years ago, the threat, it was like you got one threat at a time, right?
right,
It's like you got a network threat, and
mm,
so endpoint didn't matter, phishing didn't matter, right? Cloud didn't matter. It's like you could just stop it there, or there was
right,
just an endpoint threat, or it was just a cloud threat, or just an identity threat, right? And so when the threats were point specific, you could get away with, and it actually made more sense to do best of breed point solution. I want the best firewall. I want the best anti-phishing. I want the best endpoint. I want, right. And so that philosophy made a lot of sense. Today, though, the threat has changed. You've got encryption has made the network detection and response and the firewall, detection and response like much more challenged, right?
right,
But not out of the equation either. But what you have to do now is you have to be able to observe and correlate across all of those different points all at once, which ecosystems are just better at.
right, right.
Ecosystems, or you have to have a piece of technology that meshes it all together and does it effectively. But that is a challenge too. That was supposed to be SIM. That was supposed to be, SOAR and all these different technologies. But the fact is like you're bringing a bunch of technology that wasn't designed to work together and attempting to make it work together. And that is always going to be sort of a square peg round hole type of thing. Where ecosystems like their core backend and their core infrastructure is all shared, and it's much easier for vendors to make those systems communicate. And I think ecosystems produce largely better security outcomes because the threat is now not a point threat anymore. It's a threat that can appear kind of in all of those places at once.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation with a lot of my clients because one of the knee-jerk responses to this problem is it's okay, I can stay best of breed because AI is going to fix it. Like there's going to be this AI in the center that pulls everything in and automatically does all this stuff, whatever. And then then you kind of get into this place relatively quickly where you realize, well, I still have a data problem, right? Because there's a natural tension between AI and SaaS, right? If I've got a provider that's my endpoint provider and they have all the data in their environment and the data is not in a place where my AI can see it, and there's another SaaS that does this and a SaaS that does that, like which all these things are, right? These different proxies and stuff like that. It's the data's not even a place where the AI can get to it. So you have this cyber data problem that's very hard to solve. There's a lot of data, right? And I think that's part of the answer. Do you agree, or do you think that's part of the problem, or
It is part of the problem. Some people don't realize, like, we still do get requests. Hey, send me all my data, and it's kind of like, okay. I understand why you're asking that question, but let me just fill in the gaps here for you. In order to support your data, we run a 50 node cluster in order to support your data. So I'd love to send you your data. What 50 node what 50 node cluster is this going on that you have, right?
Yeah,
And a lot of people, endpoint
right.
data, firewall data is immense. A lot of people don't
Right.
realize like the kind of the quantities that we're talking about here. Adlumin
Yep.
processes more than 1 trillion security signals. 1 trillion security signals in a given month across our
Right.
customer base. It's just incredible.
Right.
And so that in itself requires the sort of systems and lifecycle management of the systems and uh, architecture and technology that's very specialized in order to do that effectively. And it takes experts to do that. A lot of people don't want to, you know, many companies, many even Fortune 500 companies cannot invest in the type of talent it takes to kind of build and manage those architectures. Now, can AI do it for you? Eventually, maybe it will certainly
Yeah, but
help. Yeah.
I mean, again, like you're not sending a trillion anything over to Claude any day soon here. Like, I mean, so it's just not
Yeah.
the way that works. But um, fun. So So we talked a little bit about where you've gone, where the growth is. Like, where do you see the future in this? I know we talked a little bit about AI. Like, what things do we need to do as managed cyber providers to meet the needs of our customers over the next few years? I mean, how do you see us evolving?
Yeah, AI is going to fundamentally transform, how the managed services business, I think, looks and feels to the end customer. And I'll just
Right.
kind of look at it even through the lens of Enable. And Enable's got
Yep.
three pillars, call it.
Right.
You've got what is secure endpoint management or unified endpoint
Right.
management. This technology was historically sort of the nucleus of managed services. It's
Yep.
how they provided help desk support, how they
Yep.
provided kind of break fix support for end customers. I can't get my email
Yep.
configured, or my computer's running slow and it's not working. And so it's how they did that for customers. You've got Adlumin in there, which is security operations, managed detection response, and then you have backup, right?
Yep.
And just think about like endpoint management, that help desk support for end customers, the break fix support for end customers. That is really in the AI world sort of bifurcating, right?
Right.
You've got now the concept of AI self-healing endpoints. So that will move
Right.
to the edge. And then you also have the role and responsibility to do the healing on the managed services side. So that is going to be automated in a lot of ways. In that RMM pack, you have all the customer service, customer support aspects.
Right.
People say, well, I don't want to talk to a bot. This is not true. What you want is the right answer to your
Right.
question from the bot. Where you
Right.
get angry is when the bot's not answering your question correctly
Right.
and not giving you the service and support that you want.
Right.
I think most customers don't care if it's a bot if they just get the
Yeah.
answer to the question, right?
I
And
totally agree. Right.
and AI can help with that because the old bots were terrible, right? And you were
Right.
like, no, no, send me to an operator, send me to an operator.
Representative.
See,
Representative.
yeah,
Representative.
yeah, right, right.
Right.
But I think that's going to improve. Of course, dwell time is a problem in managed detection and response. We talked about that. Like we don't have 3 weeks to detect a threat. We got 3 minutes. And an analyst, a human analyst, can't investigate an alert in 3 minutes,
Right.
right? Depending on how complicated the situation is, it'll take much longer.
Yeah.
AI can.
Yeah.
AI can.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
even if you're
obviously a
talking
solution.
to a person, the person's going to have an AI assistant up in the conversation, immediately looking at things, immediately reviewing your stuff, immediately going through your machine stuff. So it's in the program either way, right? It's gonna make a difference to the program either way.
Yep.
For sure. Um, so do you think the customers' use of AI changes like the offerings? Like I know we've had this conversation. Like our customers are moving quickly towards AI. It opens different threat vectors. What you know, what do we do as managed service providers to sort of help them navigate the risks around their use of AI?
Yeah. So there's a debate right now. Will these managed service providers get into the business of sort of orchestrating business outcomes,
Right.
sort of like what software integrators do today in
Right.
in AI. Largely, the channel minus software integrators
Yep.
um, have rejected this as a business. Will
Yep.
they take it on now with AI? I think a percentage will, but my opinion, not the largest, not a huge
Yep.
percentage. You'll have
Yeah.
sort of new software integrators pop up, and you know, a lot of businesses have morphed over time. They have an MSP arm, they have a VAR arm, and they have a software integrator arm,
Right.
and so you know they're not just like you know focused on one thing. Where I think managed service providers will play a role if you think about sort of AI as a city, where in the buildings, right? In the buildings is where all the business outcomes are produced. But
Mhm.
what will managed service providers do? They will be responsible for managing the roads and the highways and the street lights inside of that city, which if you look at AI is only as good as the data, right? So it means the connectors. AI needs to connect to your CRM. AI needs a connector to your ERP. AI needs a connector to your security platforms. Like it's going to connect via, you know, enterprise apps, via connectors, via extensions, via all these little pieces of software that bring all of your systems into your AI deployment platform. Those
Right.
connectors need to be managed. Those
Right.
connectors
Right.
need to be secure. Those connectors need to be governed. Those connectors just need to be observed to make sure
Right.
they're
Right.
still working, right?
Right.
Because connectors go down for
Yeah.
100 different reasons, right? So I think MSPs will play a critical role in sort of the streets and highways and the stoplights and the police of the city that is sort of AI, so that the business outcomes can be produced consistently by AI.
Yeah, it's a little bit emperor's clothes with the situation because every company is making these big announcements to Wall Street, AI. They're making these things, doing all, you know, they're having layoffs, they're making strategic alliances with Anthropic or whatever. But then as I kind of work with the clients and kind of say, okay, so what are you actually doing? There's a lot of, well, it's in committee, we're thinking about it, we're trying it, we're this and that. So I think the reality is a little behind the press on this. That doesn't mean it's not a thing. It just means it's a thing that's going to take a little while to figure out. So on the professional services side, Gotham is spending a lot of time just helping people create agents and get business outcomes and do stuff. And it's, I'm not sure how we're going to do that as a managed service. But I do think, and I think this is what you're saying, like as the agentic world becomes more and more real and guardrails around those agent conversations become more real, I think you will need a managed service to kind of help run the tech, chase down the, you know, shag down the fly balls and figure out what's, you know, give you some help to that. I think there's some economies to that space. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
and you know, of course, you'd hear everything, you know, AI, but fundamentally, people have got to choose sort of a. It's also like which platform are you going to choose, and you kind of have to choose an ecosystem and then build your, you know, your agentic business around that ecosystem. You have choices. I'm
yeah,
not sure it necessarily matters which one you choose, but people will have to sort of build an expertise in one of them.
yeah. Well, it's certainly, and by the way, you're in a software company. I mean, software companies are one of the companies that are seeing a lot of change from AI in terms of speed of turnarounds, number of lines of code per person, kinds of stuff like that. I mean, I mean, you feel like it's a new, and I almost feel like you can't say anything too like on some level, I feel like there's code that was written last year and code that's going to be written next year, and they're going to be totally different because of the tool sets that are available now. I mean, do you think it's that extreme? Do you think that we're seeing that kind of stuff?
It the advantages in software development
Yes.
are incredible. Um, are absolutely incredible. Code that would have taken entire teams to write and many hours because you have to punch it out line by line by line,
Mhm.
um, can now just be totally automated.
Right.
Now, AI can build a vision for you. Like you could
Right.
put in a question, you know, or you could put in a prompt that's like, build me a vision of a product that does X. But this is where I think the human is still valuable. Like you have to understand human user experience. You do have to understand your customer, and then you have to tell AI to sort of write the code with that sort of context and vision in mind. And this is where senior engineers, people
Right.
that can understand sort of the whole picture, and by the whole picture, it's not just all the infrastructure that supports your product and how the different databases and different pieces of infrastructure tie together, but also how your customer interacts with your product and ties into that infrastructure. Then those guys can use, or gals can use, AI to write great code.
Right.
What I'm concerned about from a larger social problem and social context is the junior engineers. Where do they go? Because how juniors become seniors is hand jamming out the code and learning over time, and they don't get introduced to the larger picture until much later. Now you potentially run into a scenario, and this is, many years in the future, that they may never be introduced to the bigger picture.
Yeah, but it's that sort of operator knowledge, right? My son has a data science degree, graduated from school, went to work for a cyber startup, and I was asking what he was doing, and again, like the amount of code he was writing and how fast he's getting stuff done blew me away. We were having this conversation, and he had some challenges, and I said the problem here isn't that you don't know how to code. The problem here is you don't know enough about cyber. Like the problem is my son is not you. Like they need someone like you to create the operations, tell them what's important, do those things. Like so, to me, like I think the technical I know how to code thing falls away a little bit. But what becomes so critical is, do you actually understand the problem? Do you actually understand what you're solving for? Do you actually understand the data sets? Do you actually understand what's important? Like that, like bringing that to the forefront. And I think young people can be trained in those issues, but it's going to take some time to train them in that sort of analyst layer stuff. That's sort of the way I think about
Yeah, that's 100% correct. And even our analysts, though, you're kind of ending up with the same scope. Like 90% of what comes into at Lumen is triaged and communicated to the customer
it. Right,
using AI, right? We used to use tier ones for that. Tier
yep,
threes are the folks with the lived experience
right,
that their job is to communicate with the customer and work with the customer. But they have gained that lived experience by being an alert triager first, and then
right,
slowly over time in their careers,
yep,
seeing a bigger and bigger picture. Now, there's a lot of conversations we have like, look, we need to cut alert triage down to minutes, not
right,
10, 15, 20 minutes or whatever it is, for a human to do it. We need to cut it down to minutes because the threat is going to cut it down to minutes.
right,
And so you end up saying, well, we got to make AI do all of that.
right,
But
right,
then you kind of have no need for tier ones anymore, but you still have the need for the tier threes, the people that can see the bigger picture because AI
right,
is
right.
not there. Now, will AI ever be able to see the bigger picture and have the operator experience? I don't know because AI is only trained on kind of stuff from the past. It's
Right.
it's it's trained on data from the past. Your lived experience sees the new stuff that's not written in a
Right.
book yet or not written on a
Yeah.
post online.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know. Again, I don't think people are going away anytime soon, but I do think there's an overly, you know, I think about this like SaaS apocalypse thing where everyone's convinced that the big SaaS providers are going to have trouble maintaining their value in the face of, well, if anybody could sit and write a CRM or sit and write, you know, a package, these companies can write their own packages, do their own stuff. But like, you don't see people going, well, this Fortune 10 bank's going to write their own EDR. I mean, like there's some
yeah.
thing in the system that just isn't going to be replaced just because Claude can generate code, right?
Yeah.
There's some fundamentals to that, the kind of intelligence that's inside these systems, and it's a different kind of AI. I'm sure that was you in the
Yep.
at Lumen space applying AI to your stuff. You weren't just doing code generation.
Yep. And you know what you're saying is true because look, for just about every product category in the world, there is an open source option,
Right,
often multiple open source options.
right,
So if you wanted to build it yourself or manage it yourself, you could have done that 20, 30 years ago in just about
right.
every single product category. EDR, there's an open source
Mm-hmm.
EDR.
Mm-hmm.
You want to go get that
Yep.
code? build and manage it yourself, you could do that anytime, and you could have done it at any time 10 years ago.
Right,
To today, people people still do not do it because
right,
there's
right.
there's all the other aspects. Like when you write, even if you vibe coded your own CRM, you
Yep,
still you still got to manage the thing. You still got to make
right, right.
changes to it. You
Yep,
still got to do the life. It's got to run on a server somewhere, right?
yeah,
That server's going to go unhealthy. You know,
yeah, yeah.
like most businesses, they don't want to do that
Right, right,
because it's not their core business,
right,
right? You know, they want to spend time doing their core business, not maintaining or vibe coding or, you know, changing and modifying their own CRM. They don't want to do that. If they
right, right.
wanted to, they would have used an open source CRM. Plenty of those.
Yeah, yeah. True, 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 true. And look, the code. You're right. Code. The code was never the problem. Like that. This is a different problem. It's problem maintenance and tech debt and all that stuff. So let's just. I mean, I just want to loop back. because I want to kind of get to this place. I think a lot of customers watch these and they're trying to get some value from it. Like you're obviously been an operator. You're a chief innovation officer. Like if I'm a customer thinking about making a managed services journey or buying a new SIM or looking at this stuff, like what what process wise, how would you talk to a customer about evaluating this, making this decision, thinking about how to move forward? Like, what advice would you give to a customer, on the edge of a decision like that?
On the edge of decision about AI, you're talking about?
No, not about AI, about my cyber security management. Like, let's go back to cyber security management. Just so like,
Hmm.
if I'm shopping for a new SIM or shopping for a new MDR, like you said the world's changed. You said this, you said that, but like fundamentally, like how do I think about this problem? How do I evaluate the products? What am I looking for in a product? Like kind of, tell me what advice you give a friend of yours who's like thinking about making a change besides just buy Enable. But
Yeah, yeah.
right? Like
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So if you're evaluating any technology, you know, EDR, SIM, this, you've got to look internally and be like, all right, look, what role do I want to play in this mission, right? Um, do I want, and I generally separate that into three buckets: self-managed, co-managed, fully managed,
yeah, right,
right? And you have to decide, like, look, do I want to play a self-managed role? I don't advise this, but you can decide that. A co-managed and fully managed is really what we're talking about. There are reasons where, usually compliance and regulatory reasons, why you may want a co-managed sort of ecosystem. Not every vendor offers a co-managed ecosystem. Some of them are fully managed, and some of them are only self-managed, and some of them are co-managed. So you should decide what role you want your organization to play in that kind of sophistication curve, right?
right, right.
And then once you decide that, then you bundle the vendors in every they're the same thing in EDR, SIM, cloud,
Yeah, yeah,
SaaS security, everything. So decide what role you want to play, and then dive into the individual features that you need. Maybe you're in healthcare, you need something a little specific, or finance, you need something specific. You got a regulatory requirement, so you need strong reporting. Every sort of vendor has a different strength and different weaknesses.
right, right.
No one is perfect. And then
Right, right.
ultimately also, look, budgets always grow in security and largely are defensible even in sort of downturns. But
Right.
you know, you have to buy more and more pieces of tech now in order to
Yeah,
solve the security problem. And so the budget is always increasing because there's like some other threat surface that you have to cover. And
yep,
so, price point's important too, making sure that sort of that pricing, packaging, placement, and all that works with your, internal goals as well. That's, at
yeah,
a high level, what I recommend, because every vendor
yeah,
is different.
yeah,
Strong over here, a little weaker over here, but there's a place for everybody
yeah,
because the customer needs are so diverse.
yeah. I still think there's a tough inflection for a lot of clients who have been self-managed traditionally. A lot of CISOs sort of fancy themselves as SOC builders. They've built SOC after SOC. That's what they do. They build SOCs, and a lot of architects, tech architect, whatever you call that role, whether it's the CTO, whatever it is, like they're shoppers. Like they go out and get demos and buy products they like, and they're sort of shoppers. And so you're sort of stepping on toes coming through the door on this. And I'm not sure that but I do think there's a role. Maybe you can talk a little bit about it. Like when you said like, well, what's my mission going to be? Well, what should their mission be? Like, and how do we kind of help them kind of move to this co-managed space that we think is so important for them?
Yep. At Lumen, we focused on building a piece of technology that had high level of automation and a low requirement for customization,
Right.
right?
Okay.
So what did that mean in practice? It means we as the Ad Lumen organization would just make policy and configuration and security decisions
Hmm.
for the customer, right?
Yep.
We would make them for you and we would say, look, we've looked at the problem. The decision we made here is in your best security interests.
Right.
So we're just going to make it. And,
Right.
and what did that result in? That result in a piece of technology that was cost efficient, easy to use, and simple to integrate.
Right.
Back in my security operations center days in the Marine Corps, we implemented a SIM. It was, I don't even know if it's still around. It was called McAfee Nitro. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
still around.
Yeah.
We spent a year trying to integrate that thing, and it still didn't work right. But when you did actually get everything coming in and working exactly right, look, you could make it sing songs and do backflips,
Yeah.
right? But it took 100 people and 12 months to
Right.
make it sing songs and do backflips, right? Where if you got that kind of time and energy and you needed to do all of those things for you, then invest, and that's probably the right product for you.
Right.
There's a couple of others over the years, like Splunk.
Yeah.
Look, that thing was
Yeah.
great. You could make it do anything you wanted, but you needed 10 PhDs to like get it working, right?
Correct.
And on the other side, we're like, look, we're going to focus on sort of a different customer, one that just wants to sort of install the technology, and 90 minutes later,
Yep.
it accomplishes 80% of what they need to get out of it,
Right.
right? And that spoke to a different customer that's like, look, I want high automation. I'm paying you to make the decisions, and I want a low requirement to customization.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. Like as a seller, which I am a seller of these things. So like it's not there's a lot of interest in what things cost to buy them. There's less interest in what it costs to run and own them. Like trying to explain to people like what it's really going to be. And I think Splunk's a great example. Like they kind of like slipped in the back door that free 500 gig in and then all of a sudden like it grew and it grew and it grew and it grew and it got bigger and bigger and then they went to cyber and then so it even if I give it away, even if I gave it to you for free, you couldn't afford to own it. Like that's the conversation.
Yeah, yeah. It's like owning a plane, I heard,
Yeah.
something like
So I don't
that.
have a plane. Awesome.
Yeah. Uh,
All right. Well, excellent. All right. I think this has been great. Is there anything that I didn't bring up that you want to bring up or things that you think did we miss anything?
no, I think we hit it all. I always pass this on an AI. There's a lot of talk about governance and regulation, but those decisions oftentimes tend to um, prevent innovation.
Right.
I see a lot of companies now that are trying to over rotate on
Yep.
regulation.
Yep.
And in a lot of ways, we don't know what this technology can do and
Yep.
how it can benefit your organization. You
Yep.
know, take some risks.
Yeah.
That's my advice. Take some risks, let it run a little bit,
Yep.
and don't be in such a hurry to regulate it and lock it down.
Yeah. I think you're not investing in your people, which is the worst part. I think any cyber analyst today who's not playing with AI is not moving their career forward. Like they all should be. And I think, and some of them are going to come up with some really, really great ideas that should become agents, that should become standard practices, that should be things that are built up. But if you don't, if you don't let them use the tools because you're scared of them, you're not your employees aren't progressing and your organization's not progressing. You're just like I totally agree. Like get into an experiment mode and let it run a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't mean you have to be cavalier about it, by the way. You can
Yeah,
do
yeah,
it with
yeah,
safety and you can do it with controls.
yeah, yeah.
But I see some organizations that are just like, lock it all down. Why? Why are you doing that to yourself? you know.
I know.
Um,
I ran into a company that blocked every .ai domain extension. I'm like, that's not going to solve your problem, fella.
no.
All right. Anyway. All right. Well, cool, man. Rob, this has been great. Thank you so much for your time today. I think this is a great session, and we'll see what kind of feedback we get from the team. But have a great day, man.
All right. Thanks, you too, Ken.
Thanks, man.
See you
Bye.
soon.